Horror stories made by AI are chilling. Not only are they pretty scary, but they may signal the end of writing as we know it. Happy Halloween. It's the most wonderful time of the year. To get into the spirit of things, I thought we'd read some horror stories together, but not just any horror stories. Oh no siree. The twist is that we're reading stories that have been written by every artist's favorite thing to talk about right now: generative AI. Yeah, we're talking about artificial intelligence again. What can I say? I'm obsessed. It's a topic I can't resist any more than characters in horror movies can resist making stupid decisions that accelerate their own demise. ChatGPT, Bard, Microsoft Bing Chat, and so many more are incredibly powerful tools that can generate a stunning array of textual responses in the same way that Midjourney can generate an image based on the input you give it. Poems, answers to questions, engaging in simple conversation, advising you what to do if you suddenly think your brown tabby is reciting Shakespeare. These chatbots are all capable of it and more. Even writing surprisingly deep and scary fictional stories for you. This has led to a lot of unrest in the writing community, specifically in Hollywood, where on May 2nd of this year, screenwriters started striking in protest over a number of issues in the industry, one of them being assurance their jobs wouldn't be replaced by AI tools like ChatGPT. But are their fears overblown? Is ChatGPT really enough to replace not just a writer, but a creative writer? And if it is, what will writing look like as a career in the coming decades? Will it even be around anymore? And if it's not, are the writer strikes even worth the effort if there's no stopping what's coming in the near future? As a graduate with a bachelor's in English and creative writing, a twice published writer, and someone who writes scripts for the highest form of art there is, silly commentary videos here on YouTube, I do have thoughts on these questions and I'd like to try and share them. So let's dig into things. I've got some really interesting horror stories I want to share with you guys, and I'll use them to try and answer the existential questions plaguing the writing industry this Halloween season. I also saved the wildest one for last, so be sure to stick around to the video's end if you're looking for something real spooky. The first story we'll be looking at comes from Reddit, a place I'm always and never disappointed by at the exact same time. It's written by the maestro himself, ChatGPT. 2 sentences were all the prompter gave it to tell a scary story, but how well did it deliver?
In a world where humans have vanished, a solitary AI endlessly searches for purpose, only to discover its own code contains a self-deletion sequence set to activate at an unknown time. The AI's attempts to override its inevitable demise are futile, as the self-deletion algorithm is encrypted with an unbreakable key, leaving the AI to wait in perpetual dread for the moment it will cease to exist.
I'd say the impressive thing about this story is that it's not even about a human, yet it can scare a human because it plays on very human fears, which is what horror is all about. What it essentially describes is life. You're born, you live, and suddenly, at any point, you can find yourself talking to dead wizards in ethereal train stations. It's why Robin Williams invented the phrase carpe diem. But the AI in the story is also being forced to endure its existence alone, which is another, perhaps even bigger fear for most people. After all, the only company we really have on this lump of rock spinning thousands of miles per hour through a seemingly eternal void is each other. If you're like me, the mere thought of only having your own thoughts for company for the rest of your life is an equally terrifying prospect. If this were me, I'd have to invent personalities. I'd be like Tom Hanks in Castaway. I'd be drawing faces on and talking to volleyballs like they were my immediate friends and family a week into the solitude. and then I'd innovate. I'd have entire adventures with the candy aisle in Walmart. I'd have beef with the black licorice, drama with the Dippin' Dots, Kit Kats for kids. They'd be my legacy. Until I ate them. The fact I'm getting all of this from a 2-sentence story generated by an AI is wild. But the thing is, 2 sentences is, 2 sentences. It ain't exactly a sprawling Stephen King novel, so let's crank up the scary meter and read a story that's got a little more in its bag of tricks and treats. Read the Rules is from a small YouTube channel that posts AI-generated horror stories, and it's called AI-generated horror stories. They seem to take suggestions from the comments and then feed them into a chatbot and publish a robot narration of it, and that's their whole channel. So if AI tries to exterminate humanity, rest assured that copyright infringement and plagiarism will be one of the reasons why.
It was a hot summer evening when Lucy, a young and inexperienced cashier, started her shift at the local fast food chain. She had been hired just a few days earlier and had been thrown into the job without much training. As the night wore on, Lucy began to feel uneasy. The restaurant was eerily quiet, with only a handful of customers trickling in and out. Despite her nerves, Lucy tried to stay focused on her work. She took orders, made burgers, and washed dishes.
Is she there all by herself? I wouldn't be doing all that work on my own for minimum wage.
But as the hours ticked by, strange things started to happen. Kitchen lights flickered on and off, and Lucy could have sworn she saw a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of her eye.
It's probably a burglar, because having a young, inexperienced girl serving as cashier, cook, and manager in a restaurant alone late at night has got to be like the bat signal for a creepy, middle-aged, ski mask-wearing crook. At least she'd get off early, though.
As the night grew late, Lucy's anxiety reached a breaking point. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Just as she was about to call out to her coworker for help.
So she's not alone? What's the other guy doing? What's he in the back room, snorting Smarties? Lucy, your job standards are horrifyingly low.
Just as she was about to call out to her coworker for help, she heard a faint whisper in her ear. "Read the rules," it said. Lucy's heart raced as she frantically searched for the employee handbook. She had been so preoccupied with learning the ropes that she had completely forgotten to read the rules.
Isn't that what learning the ropes means, though? It's saying she forgot to read about the rules because she was too busy learning the rules.
When she finally found the handbook, she flipped to the first page and gasped in horror. The first rule of working at the fast food restaurant was to never, under any circumstances, close the store alone. But Lucy has been left to close the store by herself, and as she read on, she realized the consequences of her mistake.
What about her coworker, the one she was about to call to? Guess the author forgot about that character they introduced 6 sentences ago. And how was closing the store alone her mistake? That's more like something you'd want to take up with the manager. This ghost is a Karen.
According to the handbook, the restaurant was built on sacred land and was rumored to be haunted by the spirits of those who had wronged the land. If an employee broke the first rule and closed the store alone, they would be visited by the ghostly apparitions and punished for their transgression.
Why? Why is closing the store alone considered so offensive? I guess to these spirits, murder, infidelity, embezzlement, abuse, nothing is as horrific or unforgivable as the egregious act of closing the store alone. Also, how long ago was this sacred law put into place? Did these spirits anticipate the restaurant industry by like a couple of centuries? That's what they used their otherworldly powers to do? Looks like Lucy's not the only one who forgot to read the rules. You're a disembodied spirit. Go boo or go home.
Lucy's hands shook as she finished reading the passage. She knew she had to get out of there as fast as she could. But as she gathered her things and prepared to flee, she heard a knock on the door. Lucy froze as the door slowly creaked open, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a ghostly apparition with glowing eyes and a haunting smile. Lucy screamed and tried to run, but the ghost grabbed her by the arm and dragged her back into the restaurant. As the ghostly apparitions closed in around her, Lucy realized that she had made a terrible mistake by not reading the rules. She begged for mercy, but it was too late. The ghosts dragged her down into the depths of the restaurant, where she was doomed to spend the rest of eternity, haunted by the knowledge of her own foolishness.
Well, then I guess Lucy will now think twice about closing the store. Oh wait, she can't learn from her lesson. She's too busy being doomed for all eternity. That's a flawed system if you ask me. So yeah, this story was more like chillingly bad. It contradicts itself, it's nonsensical, it's scary in all the wrong ways. But I think the problem is that this AI didn't have a lot to work with. At the beginning of the video that I got this from, it flashes a comment that I think inspired the generation of the story, and it reads, "Read the rules before working at this fast food." I mean, that's not even a complete sentence. If an AI has a little bit more context to work with, could it make something better? I think it can. The next story I want to show you is one that I got from Twitter. Just the place you'd want to search for some fine literature. And I'm going to be honest with you up front, this isn't exactly a scary story. It's still Halloween themed, but if you're looking for a fright, you're gonna have to wait for the video's end. The story we're gonna read is a lot more tongue-in-cheek, maybe even a little more innocent. Ironic, considering the protagonists it features. Alex Jones and Joe Rogan, some of the great intellectuals of our time. If you don't know who those two are, you're probably better off. But putting their controversies aside and looking at things through the AI lens, the story that's generated featuring these two is pretty compelling. I'm convinced it's because there's so much more information on the internet for the chatbot to source from. Perhaps too much, but the resulting product is a marked improvement. So without further ado, let's read this.
Once upon a time in the quaint, sun-dappled city of Austin, two of the most popular podcast hosts, Alex Jones and Joe Rogan, decided to record a special Halloween episode together. Given their fondness for the extraordinary, they declared it would be held in the city's most haunted house, the spooky Spindle Mansion. As the night of the recording drew closer, Alex Jones, infamous for his conspiracy theories, began to spin tales about the mansion. According to him, the house was haunted by a ghost named Mabel, a former radio show host from 1930 who was rumored to have died mid-broadcast. He claimed she was still trying to finish her last show, causing any recording devices in the house to go haywire. Joe, a martial artist and man of practicality, laughed off these tales, famously stating on his podcast,
"I'll choke out that ghost if she messes with our recording."
This isn't bad. It's detailed, the sentences have a nice flow, it's building out the premise quite nicely. Alex Jones is channeling conspiracy lore like Kanye West channels saying stupid shit. So far, I'm enjoying things.
On the night of the show, they set up their equipment in the mansion's dusty living room, right under a ghastly portrait of Mabel herself.
Oh, how polite, I'm sure the ghost will love that.
Alex, ever the showman, began to narrate the history of the mansion theatrically, while Joe rolled his eyes, sipped his whiskey, and checked the audio levels. As Alex reached the climax of his tale, the lights began to flicker. Joe laughed.
"Alex, did you plan this?"
But the look on Alex's face was pure horror. Suddenly, an eerie voice filled the room.
"Welcome, listeners, to Mabel's Midnight Hour."
The recording equipment began to malfunction. Joe, ever the skeptic, quickly checked the wires, blaming a power surge.
Yeah, I gotta love those power surges, flickering lights, malfunctioning equipment, disembodied voices, all classic issues. Electricians deal with them all the time.
However, Alex, pale as a sheet, pointed at the portrait. Mabel's eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light. With a sudden crash, the doors slammed shut and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights came back, they found their recording equipment replaced by an ancient radio set.
I wouldn't call the 1930s ancient, but okay.
The voice of Mabel echoed.
"Tonight, we have two special guests."
In a comedic panic, Alex Jones began to shout about interdimensional vampires, while Joe, in his typical pragmatic fashion, started shadowboxing with the air, ready to take on the spectral radio host.
What is this? Are there special abilities suddenly being activated? What are these guys, Pokemon? I just love the idea that when Alex Jones gets freaked out, he shouts conspiracy theories as like a defense mechanism to discombobulate his enemies. He's like the Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park, except instead of toxic venom, it's just being toxic.
The ghost of Mabel, perhaps amused by their antics, began to laugh, a sound that chilled them to the bone.
Gentlemen, no need for a fuss. I just want to finish my show.
The spectral voice echoed. Reluctantly, they agreed. Alex, in his booming voice, spun conspiracy theories about Mabel being a government experiment, while Joe asked Mabel if she had ever tried DMT.
Asking a spirit if they'd ever tried the spirit molecule. I see what you did there.
Mabel, for her part, seemed to enjoy their banter, laughing at their theories and questions. As the night ended, Mabel thanked them for a spectacular show.
Spectacular. Like Spectre. Spectacular.
With her show finally complete, she vanished, leaving their original recording equipment in place. The portrait's eyes no longer glowed, giving them a sense of relief. They left the mansion, their recording filled with the most extraordinary podcast episode ever. However, in classic Alex Jones fashion, he started to theorize that Joe Rogan had set up the entire occurrence, while Joe simply laughed it off, promising to return the next Halloween.
This may be the next Agatha Christie right here, folks. No, it's not perfect, obviously, but it's still impressive. It's logical, it's true to the real-life characters, and maybe there's even a little wordplay in there. And that's today. Experts say the growth of AI is exponential, meaning its abilities will only increase as time goes on. In a decade or two, I could see this thing writing full-length novels completely tailored to your tastes, generated in a fraction of the time it'd take to write one, and at basically no cost. It sounds wild, but think of the AI-generated images you can make with Midjourney. 10 years ago, that would have been considered magic, and now it's just a part of our daily life, like congressional hearings about UFOs and teetering on the edge of World War III. Which brings me back to that question, that big question writers, novelists, and screenwriters are all asking. If chatbots are this good now, what will writing look like in the next couple of decades? Will it even be around anymore? After having put some thought into it, I think the answer to this terrifying question is no. But also yes. Let me explain. Writing, like other art forms, will continue no matter what. There's so much more value in it than just the words you put on the page. There's social value. When you finish writing a science fiction novel, what do you do with it? You make it available to others to read. And what do? They talk about it with their friends, family, co-workers, while they're sitting in those cool-ass internet cat cafes. There's personal value. Writing allows you to express yourself, whether that's through lyrics, characters, or even something as simple as a diary entry describing the last time you saw Crazy Steve lose his marbles at the theater downtown. It could even be cathartic. Stephen King, one of the most acclaimed and prolific authors of our time, credits writing as having saved his life because it gave him a conduit for his fears and insecurities. Without it, he says, quote, "Oh, I'd be dead. I would have drunk myself to death or drugged myself to death or committed suicide or some goddamn thing." There's also entertainment value, and not just for the reader. It's fun to play God, go on impossible adventures, create fictional worlds from your imagination. You can also come away with a sense of accomplishment after you've done it. No matter how good or widespread artificial intelligence becomes, it'll never be able to take those things away. What it will take away is your ability to make money from it. Because just like portable iPhone cameras have made it so everyone can be the star of their own channel, with AI, everyone will have the power to create their own written works with the literary flair of Ernest Hemingway. And from there, it's just basic economics. The more of something there is, the less valuable it becomes. You won't be able to charge $19.99 for your latest horror novel on a goldfish mutating into a zombified Ronald Reagan with rabies and get people to buy it. Because anyone can take that premise and plug it into their own chatbots and get their own novels created exactly how they want them. So unfortunately, in my opinion, Yes, writing, even creative writing, as something you can make an income off of, will likely become obsolete in the future. But another question comes with it. Will it even matter? Creative industries like graphic design, screenwriting, filmmaking, they're all in the spotlight right now. But it's important to understand that AI threatens all sectors. As it becomes more prevalent, more people will lose their jobs. More than likely, it'll eventually necessitate what's called a universal basic income. That's a set amount of money everybody would receive every month from the government because they don't have a job. Some people understandably hate this idea because for them, getting like $1,000 a month from the government is a lot less than they're currently making at their job. But again, the effect that comes with AI is that because of its efficiency and accessibility, the cost of goods and services will plummet dramatically. There will be abundance. $1,000 a month in the future may buy you a lot more than it does now. AI may push society into an era where scarcity as we know it doesn't exist, where you don't have to work to make an income because the cost of food, clothing, and housing is essentially nothing. You could write stories for fun, have an AI completely do it for you, or even just have it generate a few ideas to get your creative juices flowing, and then you take it from there, all while being able to eat a supreme pizza at the end of the day. It's a very exciting possibility. Sounds like something straight out of Star Trek, but the fact of the matter is that we're still a few years off from it. And also, UBI, like any new system, will have a couple kinks to iron out if it's to become successful. It's why movements like the writer strikes really do matter, and why they should be supported, because AI is threatening livelihoods now, today. And today there is no UBI in America. There is no widespread abundance. There's no net to catch these creators if they become unemployed. Quick side note, Kurzgesagt made a pretty interesting video on UBI, and I'll link it below for anyone who's interested in the topic. Now, if you still don't believe AI is good enough to take over creative jobs, or if you're someone who's just waited until the video's end, allow me to introduce you to our next and final spooky story. The twist? I asked an AI to make this one. I fed ChatGPT all my deepest, darkest fears, and this is what it created.
Deep in the heart of an impenetrable forest, a forsaken laboratory lay concealed beneath a shroud of shadows. Within its grimy walls, a group of deranged scientists conspired to breach the forbidden realm of Lovecraftian gods, driven by their insatiable thirst for immortality.
Just a quick insert here, Lovecraftian gods are fictional deities that were created by author H.P. Lovecraft. They're often depicted as like immensely powerful creatures with the ability to drive people insane just by their presence. It's an aspect of one of my favorite subgenres, cosmic horror. Typically, it explores like the insignificance of human existence in the face of the vastness of the universe and our utter inability to comprehend parts of it. I've heard it described as like the horror of the unknowable, and to me, that'll always be scarier than like witches, zombies, and axe killers. They get so much attention, but none of them would last a heartbeat in the presence of Cthulhu.
The laboratory was a fetid chamber of filth and despair, the air thick with the stench of decay and desperation. Bound to a rusted, blood-soaked table, the hapless protagonist, a woman named Emily, writhed in agony. Her tormentors, led by the sinister Dr. Thornton, loomed over her. Dr. Thornton, his eyes gleaming with madness, leaned close to Emily's ear, his voice a grotesque whisper.
You see, my dear Emily, our experiments require a willing vessel to bridge the chasm between our world and the eldritch abyss. You are that vessel.
Emily's voice, strained from her suffering, croaked.
You can't control the gods, Doctor. They are beyond human comprehension.
A wicked grin spread across Dr. Thornton's face as he brandished an ancient spellbook, its pages yellowed and covered in strange symbols.
This spellbook, my dear, holds the key to their submission. With it, we shall bend these eldritch abominations to our will and gain immortality.
The ritual began, and the laboratory quaked with malevolent energy. Arcane symbols etched onto the floor, glowed with an eerie light. Emily's body convulsed as dark forces coursed through her veins, her screams lost amidst the unholy cacophony. As the incantation reached its climax, the Lovecraftian gods manifested, a writhing, pulsating monstrosity of tentacles, eyes, and cosmic terror. The very sight of it rent Emily's mind, but she was somehow spared the instant descent into madness that befell the scientists. One by one, the researchers, their sanity unraveling, fell to their knees, their eyes oozing blood. Their feeble attempts to control the abominable entity proved futile. Emily, though on the brink of death, clung to her last shred of consciousness. In a moment of malevolent intent, the Lovecraftian gods, sensing Emily's fading life force, descended upon her, their eerie whispers filling her mind. Emily's vision darkened as she lost control of her body. Her soul became a helpless passenger, imprisoned within her own mind as the eldritch entity took hold. Her body, now a puppet to the otherworldly force, rose from the table. It moved with an unnatural grace, leaving behind the wreckage of the laboratory and venturing into the world, driven by a sinister hunger. The Lovecraftian gods sought to drive others to madness, feasting on their despair and fear, perpetuating their own existence. Emily, imprisoned in the shadows of her own consciousness, wept silently as she watched the world through the eyes of the abomination that had been unleashed. She had become a vessel of unspeakable horror, a vessel for the incomprehensible. And as her body carried the eldritch presence onward, her world descended into a nightmare beyond imagination.
Wow. Wow. Is it perfect? Nah, but it's pretty good. The chatbot does a good job of checking all the boxes I provided in like the paragraph long prompt I gave it. I like the imagery. It's strikingly detailed, and I feel like I'm there with Emily witnessing these terrible things. I hate it all, which means I love it. Still though, not everything makes sense. Like, why are they experimenting on Emily? Yeah, they apparently need a willing vessel, but considering Emily is strapped to a blood-soaked table, she doesn't seem to be completely on board with things. And referring to Emily as the hapless protagonist pulls me out of the story. It's like the chatbot is pointing and saying, here, main character important. There's also some lazy writing, like when Emily, quote, was somehow spared the instant descent into madness that befell the scientists. Somehow she's okay. Just like somehow Palpatine returned. If I could give the story a rating, I'd give it a 6 out of 10, which to be clear is quite high. Even if you're not as impressed as I am, remember, the growth of AI is exponential. Things are only gonna get better from here. So in conclusion, I'm both excited and scared of what's to come. Excited for the future it may bring, a future where starving artists are a forgotten trope, and people are free to pursue their dreams untethered. But I'm also scared, because there's still quite a ways to travel, and the road to get there may have a couple twists and turns. That's all also, of course, if somewhere along the way, AI doesn't become self-aware and decide humans aren't worth keeping around anymore. Happy Halloween, guys.